Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Night had engulfed the city. Silence reigned in the Johnson-Leroy household, broken only by the steady ticking of a wall clock. Sarah Johnson sat on the living room sofa, staring distractedly at her cell phone on the coffee table. She had always hated those evenings away when her husband, David, flew off on his many business trips. Their home felt colder, emptier, as if its lifeblood was disappearing with him. Yet, that evening, something different was in the air. An intuition, a presentiment, an imperceptible discomfort. She had wanted to send him a simple message to check if he had made it safely to his flight. But David's phone, forgotten on the wooden sideboard in the hall, had caught her eye. A habit, perhaps. She never searched, but tonight, her fingers had brushed against the device, as if moved by a force she couldn't explain. The screen lit up. A notification. A message. And suddenly the ground seemed to give way beneath his feet. "I miss you already. I can't wait to see your smile again." The message, signed with an unknown female name, pulsed before her eyes like a living betrayal. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought she could hear it echoing through the room. Was this possible? Was this really her David, the man she'd known for 15 years, hiding another life behind his back? At the same time, hundreds of kilometers away, David Leroy walked through the icy concourse of a crowded airport. He dragged a battered suitcase behind him and nervously glanced at the illuminated signs announcing a cascade of delays and cancellations. It was going to be a long night. Longer than he could have imagined. Because in addition to the sudden loss of his wallet, he had just discovered that his phone, his only link to the outside world, had remained at home. Sarah held in her hands much more than a simple electronic device. She held her only means of communication, her cry for help, and perhaps, the key to the truth. Fate had just placed husband and wife on two parallel lines, separated by distance, by doubt, and by a lie that threatened to turn everything upside down. The question was no longer just, would David manage to get home? But rather, would Sarah still want to wait for him? The autumn wind had picked up, making the shutters of the house vibrate. Sarah quietly closed the front door after driving their eldest son, Noah, back to a friend's house for the night. The house was now plunged into an eerie quiet, the kind where every small noise seems to amplify one's thoughts. She walked through the living room, mechanically tightened the blanket on the sofa, and sighed. For the past few years, every time David left felt like a play they were acting out without conviction. He, in a hurry, dragging his suitcase with the same coldness as a businessman chained to obligations. She, trying to mask her discomfort with ready-made phrases, "Have a good trip, take care." Simple words, but hollow. As she placed her bag on the coffee table, her gaze fell again on the phone David had left behind. The glossy black device reflected the dim light of the lamp. She hesitated. A voice inside her kept repeating, "Don't touch, it's not you, you don't need to know." But another, more insistent, more muted, imposed itself, "What if what you refuse to see is actually the truth?" Her trembling fingers reached for the phone. A simple swipe of the screen, no password, as if David had never considered that his privacy would one day be exposed. The messages appeared. A stream of innocuous conversations rolled by, colleagues, clients, travel reminders. Nothing unusual. Then, amidst the banality, a conversation stood out, recent, marked with a simple first name, Lydia. Sarah felt her stomach knot. She opened the conversation. The first words slapped her. "I'm still dreaming of your voice this morning. Promise me this trip won't be too long. I miss you already, can't wait to see your smile again." Her breath caught. The letters, almost childishly banal, nevertheless had the power to destroy 15 years of trust. This wasn't a mistake, not a misunderstanding. It was a silent confession. Sarah dropped the phone on the table, as if it were burning her hands. She took a step back, her heart pounding. 1,000 images flashed through her mind, their vacation, their promises exchanged at the altar, the birth of their children, and that evening, when she had chosen to believe that despite the tensions, despite the distance, they were still a strong couple. Everything collapsed in a second. She sat down, hands on her face, tears welling up in her eyes. One question haunted her: should she wait for David's return to get an explanation? Or should she prepare to face a truth even darker than what she had just read? What she didn't know was that at that very moment, David was standing alone, exhausted, in a crowded airport, with no phone, no money, and no idea that his life as a couple might have just fallen apart miles away. The concourse of Boston International Airport buzzed with organized chaos. Announcements blared over the loudspeakers, suitcases rolled in all directions, and lines seemed endless. David Leroy walked forward, looking tense, his gaze fixed on the giant screen that read in red letters, "Flight cancelled, indefinite delay." He sighed deeply and ran a hand over his forehead. It had been a long day, too long. A long meeting, unbearable colleagues, and now this setback that had him grounded. But that wasn't the worst of it. Just as he'd tried to buy a coffee to stay awake, he'd reached into his inside jacket pocket. Nothing. No wallet, no credit cards. Empty. Maybe stolen, maybe misplaced. It didn't matter. The result was the same: he didn't have $1 on him. Perfect, absolutely perfect, he murmured bitterly. He then searched for his phone. A reflex. But his fingers found only the empty lining of his pocket. A wave of panic seized him. He quickly saw himself at home, placing his phone on the hall sideboard, distracted by his quick goodbyes to Sarah. He must have left without it. David sat heavily on a metal bench. Around him, travelers tapped away at their screens, booking new flights, contacting loved ones. He had nothing. No way to pay, no way to call. A modern man reduced to silence, isolated in an ocean of connected people. He tried to get help anyway. He headed to the assistant's desk. The line was endless, and when his turn finally came, the employee barely listened to him. "Sir, without ID, phone number, or bank card, I can't do anything for you. But listen, I'm a frequent customer, I fly with your company every week. You can check my name, my profile, anything." The agent forced a smile. "I understand, sir, but our rules are strict. Without valid documents, I can't advance you anything." Rejected. Ignored. Like a stranger. He returned to his seat, staring out the windows where the rain was beginning to hammer the tarmac. A strange feeling washed over him: vulnerability. He, the self-assured businessman accustomed to five-star hotels, found himself reduced to a simple, lost traveler, dependent on the charity of others. He thought of Sarah. If only he had her phone, he could call her. She would come to his rescue, as always. She had that gift of getting him out of a bind, of finding a solution even in the midst of chaos. He didn't yet know that at that precise moment, Sarah had no intention of reaching out. On the contrary, she held in her hands proof of a possible betrayal. David looked up at the screen one last time. Flight cancelled. Indefinite wait. The night was going to be long. Very long. The house was bathed in a dim, almost unreal light. Sarah Johnson paced the living room, her hands clutched to her chest. David's phone still lay on the coffee table, its screen black, but to her it shone like a silent threat. She had reread this message at least 10 times. Every word burned into her memory. "I miss you already, can't wait to see your smile again." Who was David giving that smile she hadn't seen in so long? Did he really have another wife? Or was she just a friend, an overly intrusive colleague? She closed her eyes, remembering their last dinner together, a few weeks ago. David had talked about work, numbers, projects. He hadn't even noticed that she was wearing a new dress, chosen expressly to rekindle a lost connection. She had laughed to herself at her own jokes, while he tapped away on his phone. Was it already she? Lydia? A buzzing sound pulled her from her thoughts. The phone was vibrating again. An incoming call. Unknown number. Sarah hesitated. Her heart raced. Should she answer? Maybe David, desperately searching for his forgotten phone? Maybe Lydia? She picked up with a trembling hand. Hello? A silence, then a voice choked by the background noise of the airport. Sarah? It's me. David. Listen, I'm stuck. I lost my wallet, I don't have a phone. I have nothing left. I can only count on you. Her husband's voice echoed through the phone like a rope stretched between two worlds. Sarah stood frozen. For years, he had been the one holding the reins, deciding, commanding. Tonight, he was the one pleading. Can you hear me, Sarah? I need you. She took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to hang up. Let him sort it out, taste a little of the solitude he'd forced upon her so many times. But another voice, softer, older, whispered, he's your husband. The man you built your life with. The father of your children. Her fingers tightened on the phone. She wanted to scream, to accuse him, to ask who Lydia was. But she settled for a sharp word. I hear you. Then she let a heavy silence fall. David, on the other side, seemed to be waiting for an answer, a promise, a solution. But Sarah wasn't ready to choose yet. Sarah sat down in their small neighborhood cafe, her coat still damp from the light rain outside. The soft light from the hanging lamps barely warmed the atmosphere. Emily Carter was already waiting for her, a cup of cappuccino in hand, her gaze worried but attentive. Sarah, are you okay? Emily asked, her voice soft. Sarah shook her head, unable to speak right away. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she held them back. She placed her bag on the table and took a deep breath. Emily. I found a message on David's phone. Emily frowned, a hand coming to rest on Sarah's. What? Sarah showed him the phone, the screen black, but she had already recounted the contents of the text message. The words escaped with a mixture of anger and sadness. I miss you already, can't wait to see your smile again. And you think, it's another woman? Emily whispered hesitantly. I don't know, Sarah replied, her voice trembling. Everything seems so real. And yet, he's stuck at the airport with nothing. I don't know what to do. Emily took a sip of her coffee before answering, looking straight into Sarah's eyes. Listen, you have to breathe. You need to think before you make a decision. You can't act in anger. But, you can't give up on it completely either. You have to protect your heart. But what if I'm wrong? What if it really was a betrayal? I'll never be able to forgive it. Emily placed her hand on Sarah's insistently. So you set boundaries. You help him because he's your husband and you set the pace. But you don't let your heart get pushed around. If Lydia really exists, then he'll have to answer for it. And you'll choose what you can and can't accept. Sarah took a deep breath. Her friend's words were simple but powerful. They seemed to draw a line in her mind between the instinct to protect the one she loved and the need to preserve her dignity. I think you're right. She murmured. I have to think. But I can't leave him there, not like this. Emily smiled slightly, trying to give him some courage. So you help her, but you don't lose yourself in the process. Stay strong, Sarah. Always. Sarah nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew the next few hours would be decisive. Between the lies she thought she'd uncovered and the urgency of David's situation, every decision weighed like a stone on her shoulders. Across town, in a cold, noisy airport lobby, David still didn't know that his salvation would depend on his wife's strength. And that this strength would be tested like never before. David Leroy sat on a metal bench, his shoulders hunched, his gaze lost in the comings and goings of travelers. Around him, families milled about, couples laughed, employees ran with heavy suitcases. He felt invisible, reduced to a mere body in the crowd, unable to communicate, without resources, without escape. He had tried asking for help at several counters. Each time, the response was the same: without ID or a bank card, we can't do anything. But I'm David Leroy, he tried one last time to a tired employee, his voice trembling. I'm sorry, sir, the young woman replied in a polite but dry tone, we can't do anything for you. Frustration rose within him like a tide. How could he have ended up in this situation? He, the methodical, organized man, the one who controlled everything in his life, was now reduced to begging strangers for a simple coffee, a ticket, a phone call. He walked over to an information kiosk and watched other travelers use their phones, order taxis, and book hotels online. Everyone seemed perfectly at home in this connected world, except for him. Each smiling face was a stark reminder of his loneliness. A group of teenagers jostled him, laughing, without even apologizing. David felt ashamed. Not only was he blocked, but he was almost publicly humiliated, unable to react other than with embarrassed silence. Then he thought of Sarah. If only he had her phone. One simple call, and everything could have been arranged. But she knew nothing of his distress. What if there was a problem between them? What if he had misinterpreted some things? Time seemed to stretch on forever. The anguish of waiting, the humiliation of depending on the charity of strangers, the cold beginning to seep under his jacket, all of it weighed on him like an unbearable weight. At one point, he sat on the floor, his back against the window, his eyes fixed on the tarmac. Planes were taking off and landing without him being able to participate in this movement. A strange feeling of emptiness and helplessness passed through him. He muttered to himself, I've never been so alone. And yet, deep down, he knew that the only person who could get him out of this ordeal was the one he loved, the one he had sometimes disappointed without realizing it, Sarah. But did she still not know the depth of his despair? And above all, would she still be ready to help him after what he had just made her discover? Sarah Johnson sat on the edge of her bed, David's phone still lying beside her. The room was plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the light of the bedside lamp, creating dancing shadows on the walls. Her gaze wandered into space, but in her mind, images from the past played like a film she hadn't consented to. She remembered their first meeting, 15 years earlier, at a party thrown by mutual friends. David, with his confident smile and natural charisma, had immediately captivated her. Sarah, then young and full of dreams, had been seduced by his confidence and the gentleness he hid behind this facade. Then came the weddings, the trips, the late nights at the office, the laughter of their children. Noah and Lily, their youngest, were the center of their universe, the tangible proof of a love she thought indestructible. But she also relives the darker moments. The arguments about David's job, his extended absences, the promises he forgot to keep, the phone always within reach. The evenings when she felt alone, when the shadow of an invisible distance settled between them. And now this message. This simple text message had managed to reawaken all those old wounds and make them bleed again. I miss you already, can't wait to see your smile again. Was this really a sign of betrayal, or a reflection of a lack he'd never been able to express to her? She remembered the times she'd wanted to approach him, to talk to him, and he'd withdrawn behind a tired smile. Was she just a friend? A colleague? Or something more? A mixture of anger, sadness, and nostalgia washed over her. She remembered the laughter they shared, the evenings they danced in their living room to the rhythm of old songs, the promises exchanged in the rain. And now, everything seemed threatened by this word exchanged from a distance, like a crack in the solid wall of their marriage. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Her memories, good and bad, mingled in a whirlwind of emotions. She knew she had to make a decision, but she didn't know what it was yet. Should she trust this man who had built her unforgettable memories? Or should she listen to her instincts, which were screaming at her to protect herself, not to give in to blind loyalty? Sarah stood up, walked to the window, and stared out into the dark night. The streets were silent, but her mind was in turmoil. Every memory, every laugh, every tear, every promise, brought her face to face with the present moment. David needed her, yet she doubted him like never before. It was a crossroads. An intersection between the past she cherished and the uncertain future that awaited her. The Boston airport seemed to have transformed into a merciless labyrinth for David Leroy. Every corridor, every ticket counter, every unfamiliar face reflected back at him the image of his vulnerability. He had tried asking for help at every counter possible, but without ID, without money, without a phone, he was just another name, a face in the crowd. As he sat down for the umpteenth time on a metal bench, a security guard walked past him, almost shoving him, without a word of apology. The passengers looked at him with contempt or indifference. Some whispered among themselves, others took photos for fun or to share on social media. David felt shame wash over him, a stinging humiliation that seeped into his bones. A child ran past and accidentally bumped into him. The parents, far from being sorry, merely shrugged. A group of teenagers burst out laughing as they watched him try to retrieve his fallen belongings. The laughter echoed through the hall like shards of ice on his skin. David stood up, his face red, and tried to address a couple. "Excuse me, could you? I'm looking for someone to help me." The couple looked away in a hurry, as if their distress were invisible. In that moment, David felt the weight of his loneliness more than ever. Every arrogance he had displayed in his professional life, every decision he had made believing he controlled his world, everything collapsed in the face of this utter helplessness. He thought of Sarah, of the image he'd always wanted to project of a confident, protective man, capable of handling any situation. And now he was reduced to begging for a glass of water, a phone, a call, an outstretched hand. He sat down again, his back against a window, and watched the planes take off. The cabin lights twinkled like stars in the humid night. The scene might have seemed poetic, but to him, it symbolized failure, loneliness, and humiliation. And in a corner of his mind, an insidious doubt settled: what if Sarah doesn't come? What if she decides I've betrayed her trust too much? This thought hit him harder than fatigue, the cold, or the contempt of passers-by. Every laugh, every averted glance, seemed to remind him that he was no longer the powerful man he thought he was. He was vulnerable. Alone. At the mercy of the world. For the first time in a long time, David understood that life could publicly humiliate you, reduce you to nothing, and that no one, not even those closest to you, could guarantee your salvation. Sarah's phone vibrated on the coffee table, an insistent jitter that echoed in the silence of the house. She stared at it, her fingers hovering over the screen. After hours of torment, doubt, and memory, she took a deep breath and answered. "Sarah, it's me." David murmured, his voice strangled, trembling, riddled with fatigue and anguish. "David," she sighed, her heart heavy, "what are you doing calling me now?" A heavy silence fell. The two spoke but didn't yet understand each other. Sarah had read the text message, and each word still burned in her chest. David, meanwhile, was alone, humiliated, and vulnerable, hundreds of kilometers away, hoping for comfort that was slow to come. "Listen, I'm stuck at the airport. I have nothing, no phone, no money, nothing. Sarah, I need you." "David," she said in an icy tone, "I don't even know who you are right now. This message. Lydia, who is she?" He froze. The weight of his lies, his silences, his absences, materialized in his voice. "Sarah, wait, it's not what you think. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did it," she exclaimed, tears welling up. "You let me believe everything was fine, when—" David sat on the floor, the phone to his ear, unable to look around. "I assure you. Lydia is nothing. Nothing to that extent. It's complicated to explain. But what you read. I understand why you're angry. I understand." Sarah shook her head, breathing heavily. "Understanding isn't enough, David. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. I don't know if I want to help you anymore. Sarah, please listen to me. I need you now. I am alone, humiliated, lost, and only you can save me. I'm not asking you to forgive me for everything that happened, but I'm asking you to reach out to me, just this once. Silence fell again. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the storm of her emotions. She remembered every moment she had shared with David, every promise, every tear, every burst of laughter. She also remembered the pain, the incomprehension, the absences. And yet, she heard his vulnerability in that broken voice. She saw the man she had loved, helpless, begging for help he never had to ask for. She took a deep breath. "All right, David. I'll help you. But you're going to tell me the whole truth. Now." "Thank you," he whispered, almost in tears. "Thank you." For the first time in hours, David felt a glimmer of hope. But he knew the road ahead was still long. The truth had to come out now. And Sarah had to decide if their love could survive what came next. Sarah Johnson sat down at the living room table, phone in hand, ready to listen to David and finally hear what he had to say. Her breathing was still ragged, a mixture of anxiety and suppressed anger. "Sarah," David began, his voice trembling but determined, "I have to explain. This message. Lydia, it's not what you think." "Then explain, David," she cut in, her voice hard, "because I have no idea what I'm supposed to believe right now." He took a deep breath. "Lydia is my soul sister. We grew up in the same town, she's always been close to me. That message, it was after a family argument. She's going through a difficult time and just wanted some comfort." I replied reflexively, without thinking it might be misinterpreted. Sarah remained silent, staring at the phone, her heart still pounding. Part of her wanted to believe what he was saying, but the other part remained suspicious. "So all this is just friendship?" she asked cautiously. "Yes, but I've never told you the truth about anything else," he whispered. "Sarah, I love you more than anything. But there's something I've been keeping from you for months, before this trip." "What?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "I accepted a work project that could change our lives, but I didn't want to worry you. It's risky, Sarah, and I couldn't explain it to you until I was sure it would work. This trip was to finalize this opportunity, and I was afraid you'd take it the wrong way if I told you about the stress and the stakes." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and worry. This wasn't infidelity, not a betrayal of the heart, but a secret that threatened their trust. "David," she whispered, "you should have told me. Even if it was risky, we could have handled it together." "I know. I was wrong," he admitted. "And now I'm here, stuck, humiliated, unable to prove to you that you can trust me, but I promise you that everything I did for us, for our family." Sarah remained silent for a long time. She saw her husband again at the airport, alone, vulnerable, begging for her help. She thought back to the memories, the doubts, the pain, and the love they had shared. "Very well," she said finally, in a firm but gentle voice, "that I'll help you. But when you come back, you'll tell me everything. Without hiding anything." "Thank you," he murmured, almost relieved. "Thank you, Sarah." For the first time since the night began, they felt connected, even from a distance. The truth had come out, and with it, the possibility of rebuilding what had been cracked. But the future remained uncertain. The secrets revealed did not mean the end of the trials, and each step toward reconciliation would still be fraught with difficulties. The pouring rain outside pounded against the windows, but inside, Sarah Johnson felt an unusual calm. The phone in front of her displayed the screen of David's call. She knew her decision wouldn't be easy, that her heart and mind were still torn between anger, pain, and love. She stood up and walked to the window, watching the dark night envelop the city. Every memory, every doubt, every word exchanged with David that night flashed through her mind. She saw the man she had met, loved, and married, and the vulnerable, humiliated husband, begging for her help from across the country. Finally, she took a deep breath and picked up her phone. "David," she said in a clear but firm voice, "that I'm coming for you. But there are conditions. You tell me the whole truth when you get home. Everything. And after that, we'll decide what to do with our wedding." "Sarah," he replied, his voice trembling but relieved. Thank you so much." As she packed her things to go to the airport, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she chose not to give up yet, to reach out despite the pain. Hundreds of miles away, David, sitting on the cold airport bench, felt his phone vibrate again. Sarah's message made him tremble. He realized that the person he loved most had just taken the risk of joining him, despite anger and doubt. "She's coming," he murmured to himself, his eyes brimming with tears. "She really comes." When Sarah finally arrived, David practically ran to her, exhausted but relieved. Their eyes met, and in that emotional silence, they understood that this night had changed everything. The lies and secrets had been confronted, the wounds would begin to heal, and love, fragile but alive, could still find a way. Sarah took his hand, and he squeezed it gently. "We'll get there," she whispered. "Yes, we'll get there," he replied, relieved but aware that nothing would ever be simpler. As they left the airport, the rain had stopped. The city lights shone like promises of a new beginning. The night's trials were behind them, but the choices they made together in the days ahead would determine the strength of their relationship. For the first time in a long time, they felt ready to face the truth, together. A few months had passed since the night the truth came out and Sarah made her decision. The Johnson-Leroy household, once silent and heavy with tension, now breathed a different air, a mixture of serenity, caution, and hope. David and Sarah had followed their own pace to rebuild their trust. Conversations were more frank, silences rarer. Every gesture, every word, carried the memory of that night when everything had almost collapsed. But instead of tearing them apart, this ordeal had brought them closer, reminding them of the importance of honesty and patience in their relationship. David continued his career path, this time involving Sarah in every decision. Together, they learned to share the burden and responsibility, and to no longer let secrets settle between them. For Sarah, confidence was slowly returning, like a river that regains its flow after a storm. She now knew that loving someone didn't mean turning a blind eye to one's mistakes, but choosing to stay despite everything, with awareness and courage. In the evenings, they often sat together on the couch, sometimes in silence, sometimes chatting about anything and everything, as if every moment stolen from the anguish of life became precious. Noah and Lily laughed beside them, ignoring the storms they had been through, but enjoying the warmth of the family together. One morning, as the sun rose gently, illuminating the living room with its golden light, Sarah turned to David. "You know," she murmured, "I don't regret reaching out to you." "Me neither," he replied, taking her in his arms, "and I promise you that I will never cease to deserve your trust." Their eyes met, and in that simple exchange, everything was said. The mistakes, the fears, the secrets, everything was now part of their story, but it no longer defined their future. They had survived the storm, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah and David could imagine a future where love, sincerity, and respect guided their every step. Their story wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real, deep, and ready to continue, stronger than before.